Trying to fit the last two pieces in and disaster struck. All right, so it is time now to conquer the segmented ring. So let's get started on that. All right, if you want to know how I went about designing this ring in SketchUp, I will put a link to that video somewhere. All right, so this inner circle is the actual size it's going to be. I'm giving myself a 1/4 inch allowance so I can cut it round after I cut all the segments. And then we'll do the same thing on the inner circle, what its actual size is, and a 1/4 inch allowance. All right, so we just got to cut all the pieces to fit this circle. All right, so we're going to use cherry as the accent strip between each board, or between each segment, and then we're going to use walnut for the main body of it. All right, so I'm getting ready to prep my material to make the grid and the segmented ring. And so when I do this, I want to make sure I avoid any kind of sapwood. I don't want to be going along with a nice dark ring and then all of a sudden it gets into this lighter wood. I think that would look kind of funny to have some light spots in the ring. So I'm going to discard this little strip and concentrate all my cuts to be come out of this side here. All right, so we're going to set up a wedgie jig, I think a lot of people call it. All right, so this ramp is to help kick the little parts off as we go. So 360 degrees divided by 24 is 30. So that's how this works out. And then this guy is going to set our distance. All right, we're all set up. Got my stop. I have some scrap wood that I'm going to use as a test run just to make sure everything is dialed in correctly. So we're going to cut 24 of these guys and then assemble it to make sure we're good. And then we'll cut the actual walnut work pieces. All right, here we go. Oh, we're already f***ed up. Whoops. All right, so 360 divided by 24 is not 30, it's 15. So my 30-degree wedge is not gonna work. I actually need a 15-degree wedge to get me there. All right, so that should be 15 degrees. How it works is these guys should be parallel to each other. So make a cut over here and then make a cut over here and then just keep going back and forth making that wedge. And this is parallel, so any kind of inconsistency by going back and forth like this should cancel each other out. And I should end up with a really close to, if not dead on, 15-degree wedge. All right, so we're gonna do a test fit. I cut up some scrap junk wood just to make sure I wasn't screwing everything up. Tape my first segment down. I think that'll make it a little easier. So far, so good. Tracking the circle pretty well. All right, we're tracking the circle nearly perfect, so I think we've done well. Perfect. All right, so I haven't touched the table saw or nothing. I'm gonna use the same setup to cut the walnut pieces instead of this ugly scrap material. And then we'll get to gluing it together. All right, so I taped this end of the tape down and it's sticky side facing up. And I stretched it out along the edge of the table here so I can make sure I'm going in a reasonably straight line. Whoops. And then I'm going to tape the other end down on this end. All right, and then I'm going to clamp a straight edge down right on the edge of that tape. All right, do I have them all? Let's see, I should have been counting better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
23, 24. Last two. All right, so I got them all stuck down to the tape, ready just to curl up and tape together. So do I do a test curl to make sure it all works? Or should I just put glue in there and hope for the best? I think I'm gonna put glue in there and hope for the best. All right, I'm gonna use a slow set of epoxy so I have plenty of time to glue this up. I think putting glue on these guys are gonna be a little bit tedious. So I'm gonna coat it twice. I'm going to go through and put a coat of glue on each one of these and let it soak into the end grain because it's primarily end grain. And then I'll come back and add another coat after that's soaked in, and we should get a really nice strong bond that way. All right, so hopefully that's soaked in enough, and we'll just put another coat on here. All right, so we've officially made a mess. Some messes are worth making. Everything looks nice and tight all the way around. Shouldn't have touched it. All right, we got everything all glued up and not stuck to the workbench, just stuck to the paper. So next step, we need to get it cleaned up and sanded up, and then we'll start routing some profiles and a dado for the copper to go into. All right, and of course, route it perfectly round. So if my lathe was big enough, this would be cool just to stick on the lathe and make it round that way. All right, since I can't fit this on my lathe, I'm gonna double stick tape this down and use this as my trammel to route out the circle, the inner and outer circle. So first, I need to do a little layout because I want to be able to take this off and then do a round over at the router table and then put it back on here to lay out my decorative cross pieces on this guy. So let's do a little layout here. All right, we did a small round over on the edge just to dress it up and ease over the edge. And now I'm setting up to cut a dado in the back of this for the copper to recess into. And then I will also cut a recess in the back of our grid for the copper. So I'm just using the copper as a gauge to set the height of the bit. All right, so next we need to install our decorative crossbars here. And I want to make sure that they're perfectly parallel with each other. I don't want them being crooked or out of a line. That's going to be kind of hard to do on a round circle. So I'm going to double stick tape this guy down. That way I'll be able to reference off the edge is the plan. All right, so I don't want it to move around on me, so I'm just going to screw it to the table. All right, so I milled up some scrap wood, the same thickness as my circle here. And this is what's going to be my guide for squaring everything up. That way I can measure everything right off of this. All right, and since this is a one-time use jig, I'm just gonna nail it down with some brad nails. And as long as I'm squaring off the bottom and these rails each time, everything should come out nice and square. All right, and since this side is what we're gonna measure off of, make sure my first rail is nice and flush. All right, so how this is gonna work, my first spacer will go down and we'll screw these down, route it out, pull this guy out, put my second spacer down, which will move us to the second position, route it out, and then move to the third spacer, put a piece down, route it out, and then that way we'll have it spaced out just how we need it. All right, there's for the first stick right there. All right, so I got my grids taped in place temporarily just so I can get a visual on it and see what's going on. I got my circle cut out. I need to just position it here. All right, so this is going to be a half lap into this. So I already got the dados cut in there. So now I'm just getting it centered. And this piece is the one that's going to go from top to bottom. So it needs to be perfectly centered or it's going to throw off the whole circle design. All right, so now I'm just going to use my marking knife and mark exactly where it intersects here. Since this is a curved surface, I'm going to have to do a lot of this by hand. All right, so here's the game plan. Here's my knife marks that I've transferred from the circle. And I'm setting them in pretty deep with my knife. Then I have my marking gauge set to the depth that I need it to be so I can score along here on both sides. All right, and then I have my router plane set to the depth that I need to go as well. Or a stop on it. I'm going to take it into little pieces. Remove some of that material. And I'm just going to work my way down, recutting in my original scribe line. And as I get down to the final couple passes, I'm going to definitely be going in from both sides to make sure I don't accidentally tear out a big chunk. All right, one down, 4 more to go. Trying to fit the last 2 pieces in and disaster struck. Okay, so before I throw 2.5 days of work away on this little segmented dealy whacker here, I'm going to see if I can save it. Luckily, it's split along most of these seams, and these seams land underneath the half lap. So I'm pretty sure I could just glue it over there, and I'll pin it, and we should be good to go. I think we're going to make it happen. So I'm going to get some epoxy and see if we can get her done here. All right, thanks for watching. Next week, we will get on to some assembly and pre-finishing some of the parts and then get prepped for building the drawers.